I want to talk about today why removing foods and food removals and getting rid of all those triggers just doesn't fix eczema. We'll talk about what actually builds tolerance and kind of how tolerance fits into this picture. So I'm going to pop this link in here. So let me get that in, and then we will dive in here today and talk about what we're going to talk about. Let's see. Okay, perfect. I'm horrible at typing and putting things in at the same time. So there we go. Wanted to get that in the comments. All right, had it copied, and I don't want it to lose it as we talk through this today. So today I want to talk about something that just might challenge what you've been typically told about eczema, and that's that removing foods does not heal eczema. Okay. And this is a big one for a lot of parents. And, you might be resonating with this. You might go, yeah, that's what I've been told to do. That's what we've been doing, just trying to find those triggers. And it's a really, really common approach to eczema. I mean, you go online, you go into the groups, you read the books, everything focuses on take out the triggers, take out the triggers, take out the triggers. Okay. But and while that's not 100% untrue, it's not the full truth. Okay. And I'm going to talk about today a little bit deeper into why that is and why we have to take the focus off of that. There's just a lot more to it. So let me explain what this is all about, okay? So for some kids, yes, there are true reactions to foods. And I'll explain in a moment where those fit in and what we need to do. And then for some kids, there aren't specific triggers when it comes to eczema. So not every child with eczema is going to have food triggers, okay? A lot of them do, yes, but not all of them, okay? And there is a common thread with both of these types of eczema kids, and that's that their immune system is overreactive, it's dysregulated, and it's anything but calm, okay? And this is what causes those reactions to foods and other triggers, whether they be environmental or, things like that, okay? And this is important because we have to recognize that removing foods and triggers is not truly fixing that underlying problem of why that immune system is inherently reactive. It's just helping the thing, or it's just the thing that's making us see the symptoms, okay? So we have to really think of what's going on with these kiddos, sort of like having a leaky pipe under your sink. I love this analogy because it really fits, okay? If you just turn off the tap, which would be the equivalent to taking out the foods, you're not actually fixing the real problem. You're just avoiding the real problem, right? It's like saying, well, we're not going to fix the pipe, the leaking pipe. Instead, we're just going to avoid turning on the water. Then we don't see the leak, right? We don't see the rashes if we take the food out, and sometimes we still do. And then in the meantime, we have all this stuff underneath that's still broken, right? And we need to fix that. And that's kind of where this all fits into that picture. So instead, we have to look at what's actually driving and making that immune system to be reactive and why it's launching that immune response against foods, okay? That's what we really have to be focusing on. And that is a big one, okay? And it varies from child to child as to what the combination of those factors are. And this lies in looking at what truly is going on underneath the surface, inside areas like the gut, supporting that through diet, supplements, lifestyle. It means looking at toxicity and supporting detoxification. That's a big one for these kiddos. That's probably the two biggest issues that I see when it comes to dysregulating the immune system for these kids, okay? It's gut issues and toxicities are the two big ones. Yes, we can have some other factors that play a role, but generally as long as we're kind of doing other things to support them, those factors don't play a big role, but the really big role is in the gut issues and the toxicities, okay? Toxins dysregulate that immune system. They can be immunosuppressive. They can just make it really dysfunctional, and that makes it super reactive because when the immune system doesn't know how to behave and doesn't know what to do, and gut issues drive this too, okay? Then it just goes off, right? It doesn't know that something is safe and okay. It just thinks, I got to go tackle that thing because that's the job of the immune system. So it gets really confused, okay? So yes, reducing triggers or removing triggers can reduce symptoms, but reducing symptoms is not the same thing as rebuilding resilience, okay? And helping the body to be able to tolerate those things again. That's where we really need to be focusing. And that comes down to all of those root causes that I've talked about many, many times in here, okay? Helping that immune system calm so that it can tolerate things and not continue to react. That's where we really want to get to with these kiddos. So if you've removed dairy, you've removed gluten, maybe eggs, maybe nuts, maybe soy, the list goes on, right? Maybe even more, and they're still flaring, you're not crazy, okay? And you're not failing. It's just you're not seeing the complete picture, all right? And like I said before, yes, some kids do need to still have triggers out, but we have to make sure we have these other pieces in place too. So let me know in the comments if you're catching this live or on the replay, if you've experienced this. Maybe you've taken out foods for your kiddo and maybe seen a slight difference. Sometimes you'll see a slight difference or it'll be temporary. And the next thing you know, they're either reacting to something else, you try to get that food back in and they're still reacting. And it's just like this restrict, restrict, restrict mentality. And you have to keep taking things out. It's really hard, right? And ultimately things aren't resolving, but you're getting this like narrower and narrower and narrower list of safe foods. So give me like a hands up, give me a 1 in the chat if that's something that you've experienced, because I know a lot of you have. So eliminations often give relief temporarily, and they do help to calm. And this is why sometimes we do see that there is an effect, right? Because I know a handful of you are going to say, oh yeah, we took out dairy and my child was reacting to dairy and things improved significantly. Yes, that can still happen, okay? And that's why, you know, if a child is truly reacting to something and we do get a food out, that's why people do sometimes see at least some improvement. It's going to vary depending on the child. Some it's marginal, some it's none, some it's going to be fairly significant, okay? Where parents are like, oh, we took it out and their skin is clear, all right? It still doesn't get to the underlying issues, and I'll talk about that in a second, okay? And we have to have the right trigger out to see some of that improvement, okay? And because, yes, we still get some of that temporary relief and we have the immune system calm slightly from having these things out, it does seem to work and we seem to get some improvement, okay? But here's why it's often only temporary. Number one, removing inflammatory foods, it does lower immune stimulation, so we see that response, okay? But it doesn't correct the underlying issues, okay? If we have lower stimulation, so it means that if we don't have that thing that's causing the response and triggering that whole pathway, we're going to have fewer visible reactions, okay? So this is why we'll see that temporary relief. But underneath it all, that immune system is still inherently reactive, okay? And it's being driven by things like the gut imbalances and the toxicities. That's where we need to go. So we have to remember, less irritation is not the same thing as regulation being achieved in the immune system, okay? Because if the gut barrier is still compromised, if the immune signaling is still missing or misfiring and sometimes it's not even there and sometimes it's just all over the place. If detox pathways are still overwhelmed and immune function is being affected from that, right? Toxicities are a big driver of immune dysfunction. The system's going to remain fragile. It's going to remain reactive. You're not going to achieve that healing, and you're not going to get that tolerance built to get foods back in, or not just even foods, to tolerate things in the environment too, okay? Everything then underneath remains reactive. Nothing is truly fixed. So this is why removing foods is just an avoidance tactic. And yes, like I said, it will deliver some results, okay? And it can provide some relief. And yes, if someone is truly reacting to a food, we do need to take it out, okay, to help bring some initial calm and to just get them some relief. But it must be accompanied by actually looking at what is making the body react. We always have to be digging into why. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Okay. And this is why often when we take out foods, right, new foods become triggers. This is really common. You take out like 2 things, they do well for a while. Next thing you know, they're reacting to something else that you brought in to, replace that particular food in the diet, right? We also find generally tolerance tends to shrink over time. Sometimes again, more foods become reactive or you can't get those foods back in. It seems to be worse than it was in the past. Reintroductions fail. You just can't get those foods back in. When you can't get foods back in most of the time, and yes, there's a small group of kids that just won't be able to get certain foods back in, but for a lot of them we can if we're addressing those underlying causes. So just removing a food and waiting, 3 months, 6 months, and then trying again and not doing and addressing any of those root causes and doing that underlying work, you're not really going to get there, right? And often too with these kiddos, we'll see things like seasonal flares worsen. You still have the foods out. It's like, well, how come they're fine for this time of the year when I have the food out, but then this time there's no change in the diet and it's still not there, right? It's because it's not really the food. It's the chronic inflammation that's affecting the skin barrier and lowering that resilience in the body to those external stressors, whether that be like conditions aren't perfect, it's dry, it's hot, it's humid, whatever it might be, it's cold, whatever for that particular child. or when allergens are really high. Again, those things are bombarding that immune system and it's reactive, right? We have to help that immune system become less reactive, and that's all about looking at those root causes, okay? So I want to explain the difference between avoidance and tolerance, okay? I've talked about avoidance being where we just reduce that exposure, they don't have that thing in. Tolerance being where, we get better balance and function in the body and healing in the body, and the immune system is able to stay calm in spite of exposures, okay? Doesn't happen right away, but then over time, hey, we can get those things in again that they once reacted to, and there's no flare, which is like incredible, right? We can get them to eat those foods again, or be able to go out into the environment and they don't have to live in that bubble. That's huge, right? So the goal should not be a shorter food list. That is not the goal with these kiddos. If anything, it's a bigger food list. Every time it's a bigger food list we want to establish for these kiddos. But the goal should be a stronger immune system, okay? And how we develop that stronger immune system is by looking to what those root causes are, what is really driving all of those things. It's not established through food removals, okay? Avoidance can, yes, get quick temporary results, just like a steroid or a cream. And sometimes it does need to be part of the process, but it doesn't build tolerance, okay? And we really need to make sure that we're looking at the long-term picture here and the long-term game and what's really happening at that deepest level inside. So how do we build immune tolerance, right? Talked a little bit about it. We have to get to those root causes so that not only can they get clear skin, but that they can be exposed without those reactions. Okay, and this is all about things like repairing the gut lining. It's about reducing the systemic inflammatory load, okay, so that we don't have those inflammatory processes driving this, because that's what eczema is. It's an inflammatory condition. We have to stabilize immune signaling, again, helping to get that immune system to be calm. We need to support nutrient insufficiency, right? If the body and the immune system and other areas of the body don't have what it needs, they're not going to work well, okay? And we need to address that nervous system stress, address all of those toxins that are coming in that are affecting the function of everything, okay? So it's definitely multi-layered. And all the things that drive why their immune system is overwhelmed, right? Why it's dysregulated, why it's reactive. That's where we need to focus, okay? So you don't expand tolerance by avoiding everything forever. That doesn't give us tolerance, all right? And often it fails at giving relief once you hit a certain point. It usually works for a little bit and people are like, this is great, we're getting relief. It sucks that we have to keep so many foods out, right? Or they have to live in that bubble. So it's also not sustainable. But we often find it stops working after a while because it doesn't go deep enough. So that's what we have to do. And this is why so many moms plateau, right? We have to go deeper. The approach that most families take is like, number one, remove those obvious triggers. Number two, let's clean up the creams and switch to natural creams and natural products. We want to clean up the diet, step 3 and step 4. Let's get in a probiotic. That is the typical approach. And then everything stalls. They hit the wall. They plateau, thinking that they've done everything possible that could possibly be done in a natural approach. But in these cases, that's usually not the case, right? They've never actually repaired that barrier function properly and looked at those gut imbalances. They haven't looked at getting in the proper detox support and addressing toxic overload. They haven't retrained those immune responses, and they haven't rebuilt microbial diversity strategically in a way that their child needs. That's what we have to focus on, because you can't just supplement or, cream your way out of all of this. It doesn't happen. Okay, we need to, and we can't just keep removing foods to get through this. We have to address these right pieces in a way that's appropriate for your child. So if your child's eczema has, or, it's gotten worse, their food list has gotten smaller, which is so common with so many of these kids because their body is so reactive, it's not the end of the story. Okay. Tolerance can be rebuilt, but it requires intention. It requires order. It requires making sure that you have the right things in place, okay? And this is exactly why inside the Healthy Child Blueprint Foundation's membership, we don't just remove. If a child is reacting, yes, it's important to do, but we also have to rebuild, okay? We have to look at what is actually happening internally at that right level, because restriction, number one, is exhausting and it doesn't solve the issues. But resilience, that's freeing. That creates freedom in your life. that creates space and joy and fun and opportunity that most eczema parents feel has been robbed from their children, right? We go deeper internally so that you can start addressing these root causes, giving your child the support that they need to have that clear skin and tolerance so they can be exposed to these things. So if you're tired of, running on that hamster wheel and you feel like you're just not sure what else you can do, 9 times out of 10, there is so much more that you can do. And I see this all the time where parents think that they've, hit the wall and there's nothing else. And that's typically not the case. There's usually a lot of other options that just haven't been explored.